Oh my God, what did I just witness? I did not even know. Well, I guess I kind of knew about this thing called Karate Combat. I remember hearing faint echoes about it, but I did not think that this was going to be free on YouTube. Link in the description. Link in the description. I'd like to repeat one more time. Link in the description, because this is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen as a fight fan. Now, I am a fight fan. If you're not familiar with me, I'm the amateur super fan. I'm a super fan in the most amateur sense, and I'm here to say that this is one of the greatest things that I've ever seen come out of any combat sports in the recent times. It's so innovative. It's so different. It's unlike anything you've ever seen, and yet it's so familiar. Let's go ahead and dive right into this, because this has got me hype. Okay, let's break it down real quick. It's unlike, well, I don't know about anybody of you guys, but for me, I've never seen karate combat. I've seen karate and I've seen combat, but I've never considered the two. I did not even know it was free on YouTube streaming. Lately, I've been into like really weird streams that seem to be popping up, like sumo wrestling and other stuff that I'll just get into at another time. But right now, we're talking about Karate Combat Hollywood, one of the most badass combat sports that I've ever seen in my life. And I gotta say, first and foremost, what you notice right away is Bas Rutten and Danny Trejo. Now, if you don't know Danny Trejo played, what did he play? He was in King of the Hill. He was in Machete. He's in a lot of things that you've never seen. He has the most badass voice that you would have ever considered for combat sports. And I didn't even know he was a combat sports fan. I guess I should have known. He was actually a boxer for, he was a prison champion in boxing. And he looks like a prison champion in boxing. And I assure you, his voice is perfect for this event. I've never seen an announcer be so badass for his first time, or what I assume is his first time announcing. Again, this is my first time ever seeing this. I didn't even know this freaking thing existed. So right away, you see two familiar faces, Bas Rutten and Danny Trejo. Now, you know Bas Rutten as being one of the most badass men to ever walk the earth in terms of fighting. He was a heavyweight champion for a ton of organizations, including at one point, well, he's most well known for his Pancrase time, where he went 23 fights undefeated, came back into the UFC, and had one of the greatest leg kick knockouts that I've ever seen in my life against, I forgot who he was fighting, but it was so epic. He had one of the, and he was a UFC champion. Yeah, now that I think about it, he fought Kevin Randleman and he beat him. Now, he is a commentator. Now, if you remember his commentating for Pride, he is an excellent commentator. He adds something different. And I wrote a whole bunch of notes on this card that I just saw for Combat Karate Hollywood. Now, this is crazy. Let's break it down right here, because it's so different and it's so familiar. And it's wild. It's got me crazy hype. So, what do we know about combat karate? Now, I personally don't know anything about combat karate, because this is my first exposure to this venue. I didn't even know this. Again, I did not even know this was a thing. So, what do we know? It mixes elements of boxing, MMA, and mostly karate. Now, how does it do that? Well, you see, it has MMA-style gloves, which we'll get into more, because these gloves, they play a major role, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it has a square ring, like a boxing ring. Now, actually, the ring is actually one of the most important pieces of this combat sport, because the ring is unlike anything that I've ever seen in my life. Now, going back to just the whole basis of what combat karate is, it's brand new relative to sports in terms of just raw combat damage. I have all this whole list that I wrote down as I'm watching it, because it's just so interesting that I had to write it all down. And from time to time, I'm just going to peek over and see what I wrote down, because, again, super hype. I'm losing my train of thought as I speak. So, it's brand new in terms in sports in terms of raw combat damage. Now, in regular karate, point karate, you don't really see too many people getting like absolutely viciously hurt. And I mean like really seriously hurt. Like combat sports hurt. The way combat sports was supposed to be. Now, right away, boom, first thing that I saw. Oh my god, you know what? I'm not even gonna get into that just yet. Let's go ahead and go down my list real quick. Okay, so this is again a relatively new sport. The corners are actually located above the combat ring. Now the walls are the best way that I've ever seen combat implemented. It's all located on a 45-degree angle. So these walls are actually angled at 45 degrees. Now that means these guys can actually utilize the wall in a way that I've never seen before. I've never seen this before on anything. Well, no, actually, you know what? I did see it before on, I think, what was some type of MMA league. But this does it in a whole different way. So, the walls are angled at a 45-degree angle. They are 6.5 meters by 6.5 meters in a square formation like a boxing ring. And it's strange because the corners upon which the fighters all, take their breaks, their 1-minute breaks, it's lifted above the ring. And in order to go to combat, you have to go into the ring. You have to sink down into the ring in order to engage in combat. It's so strange and bizarre, but so cool. You're literally going into the ring, a ring of combat. Now in MMA, you basically go to your corner, which is just a side of the octagon. This is a traditional square combat ring. So there's no curvature to the outside of this ring. It's all there in a square like how you've seen in boxing. Now, what is probably specific to this event, I'm not sure how they implemented it in other ones because this is the first time I've seen it, but this was a standing room only, invite only crowd, which is fascinating to me because that makes it just so much cooler to me. I don't know why. The fact that this was a 3-hour event and you have to stand up the whole time, you're probably a really serious fan. I mean, Frank Shamrock was there. Obviously, Bas Rutten was there. He probably had like a stool or something because he's freaking Bas Rutten. Yeah, I freaking hope that he has like some type of thing to not stand up for 3 hours. But if he did, he's probably standing up there the whole time, just loving this whole thing because this is true combat sports. This is not point. Now, this is a 3-minute rounds with 1-minute break in between and a 10-point system. But I assure you, I don't even know how many of these fights went actually all the distance. Actually, a few did, yeah. You know what? A few did. But we'll get into that in just a minute. So, going back to my notes here. Let's see, what are we saying? The corners are located above the combat ring. The walls are at a 45-degree angle. The ring is 6.5 meters by 6.5 meters. So it's 21 and 4 inches, more or less, long and 21 and 4 inches wide. And it's a square. Now, these 45-degree angles are not included. That's just including the base of the fighting ring. Now, these gloves. All right, you know what? No. Let's real quick. Let's go back to these strange rules that differentiate it from MMA to combat karate. So in MMA, whoa, okay. There's so many different rules. It's so different, and yet it's so similar. But it's crazy. The most noticeable thing that popped off to me right away, exclusively so different, and that is amazing, but also horrifying in a sense. This is what's called a 360 fight. That means a 360-degree fight. That means you are allowed to get hit in the back of the head. You have to protect yourself at all times because the ref will not stop you from getting hit to the back of the head. I don't know how to describe that any differently. You are required to protect yourself at all times because the ref will not stop you from getting hit to the back of the head. Now that is crazy different from MMA. Oh yeah. So the ref on the very first fight that I saw, which we're gonna get into, because that's a crazy fight. That's the perfect way to introduce yourself to this sport. On the very first fight, the ref immediately took a point for hitting somebody after he told them not to separate immediately. And that is my favorite thing that I've ever seen in combat sports ever, because nothing frustrates me more than seeing somebody get hit after the bell and the ref not taking the point. That is the most frustrating thing that I've ever seen, i.e. Holly Holm versus Jermaine Durandamy. That was the most frustrating and flagrant foul that I've ever seen in MMA. And it was disgusting, and I hated it with every fiber in my being that I hate seeing that. So right away, I'm already a fan. Now I know that these refs in particular are not standing up for that. I mean, 1 point in a fight is huge in this 10-point system. It's huge. So I'm glad to see that these refs are willing to take a stand right away at the beginning of the sport, that you are not allowed to do that. You are not allowed to hit someone after a bell or after a stoppage. That's just the worst thing that I know about in any combat sports. It just drives me up the wall. And that just won huge points for me. Now that basically almost made me a fan right then and there. Now, the 360-degree fight, it changes the whole angle of everything, because now you have to worry about legitimately getting hit in the back of the head. And what's interesting about this fight, though, again, one of the differentiators between the MMA combat and karate combat is that, so real quick, some of the differences is that you cannot kick to between the leg and the hip. So you can't kick the thigh region, but you can low kick somebody to death. I mean, there's tons of this, what they kept on referring to as sweep the leg, as obviously as a Karate Kid reference, which I love, because I mean they're trying to bring it back to the root of karate, which is great, because that means in combat sports you already have this gigantic built-in audience that has a whole new venue to be expressed. Because I mean, how many people did you know that actually were into karate? Because that's just what they were into, as a child. Think about one of my favorite movies was Karate Kid. I mean, that was one of the greatest movies, Sweep the Leg. Of course, one of the most iconic lines of one of the most iconic movies, at least right here in America. So they had the whole sweep the leg thing, and that was pretty cool. It was pretty interesting. Now I'm not a huge fan of not being able to hit to the thigh. I would have really preferred that some of these guys could hit to the thigh, because I mean, a really solid thigh kick can stop a whole bunch of attacks. But that is the rules, and so far I did not see too many people break the rules. Another one of the rules is clinching. So it's strange. You are not allowed to clinch, but you are encouraged to do takedowns, which kind of changes it up for so many people. Think about how many fighters depend on the clinch for the takedown, and think about how many fighters lose that opportunity if you don't have that clinch. It totally, completely changes the game. Now you completely change the way that you approach the fight, because you can't have a major component of your arsenal of the clinch. So many people are just not willing to do that. And I'm so glad that these karate guys are doing that. And what's interesting is that a lot of these karate guys are training with MMA guys, so they have a whole different respect for the stand-up and for the takedown. And it's fascinating, because this is essentially a brand new sport. So these guys are going to learn how to adapt to this kind of new sort of style where they can take down, but they cannot clinch. And during a takedown, this is really cool. During a takedown, you have 5 seconds to wail on a guy while he's on the ground, unless you choose not to pounce. Now, if you choose not to pounce, that makes a difference, because now the ref is just going to stand you up immediately. And during this whole time, the clock is running. So it's really fascinating. And there's several fights that I saw right now where these guys, once they had the opportunity to start wailing on somebody, they did. And during one of the fights, one of the fighters actually committed the very first, what I think, or according to Bas Rutten, was the very first axe kick, or yeah, it was an axe kick to a downed opponent, because I actually wrote it down one of these notes that I'm not a huge fan of people only punching to a downed opponent. It made no sense. It's like you have these gigantic assets of legs. Oh, look at that, 1 to 10. That's kind of cool. Totally useless, but kind of cool. Now, these apparently you can kick to a down opponent. Not quite sure about the rules, because there are several rules that I had trouble really understanding the way that they went about it, because it didn't really make sense to me, a lot of it. But again, this is a brand new sport, so I'm sure everybody's kind of feeling this in some sort of sense. Because, okay, so the walls are angled at 45 degrees, right? The ring is angled at 45 degrees. But at some point, the fighters would actually fall onto each other on this 45-degree angle, right? And then they would be on top of each other, and then the ref would split. But on other instances, the fighter would essentially fall on his back to the wall, the 45-degree angle wall, and then the other fighter would almost kind of fall on him, but essentially start landing, but not really. And then the ref wouldn't separate it. And what's interesting is that the ref, I'm not sure if he does the 5 count, because it looked like when I'm looking at his mouth that he's counting to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I think Bas Rutten said at some other point that somebody else is doing the 5 count. And I guess I was just kind of confused about who's doing that 5 count. I would be a huge fan of the ref being relieved of the 5 count duty, because I think I did hear a 5 count being counted a little bit faster for the one female fighter that I saw on this card. The one female fight that I saw on this card, as opposed to the very fight before it, which seemed to go like 1, 2, 3, and then the female fight was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. It felt strange. So I'm not completely sure on the way that's being implemented, but it's again, it's a brand new sport, so I'm not supposed to know. We're supposed to discover this together, and it's so fascinating. Okay, so again, 45-degree walls, and I'm not sure at all what the weight class system is, because they use generic terms like lightweight, but without actually listing the actual weights on the fighters. And some of these fighters look dramatically different in terms of size. In particular, the female fight, Ferreira versus Ait Ibrahim. Now, these two were noticeably different sized. I'm talking about, like, one person looked more closer to Holly Holm, and one person looked closer to Jessica Andrade. Now, I'm not saying that they're not the same weight, but they looked noticeably different, and I didn't. And I believe in that fight, Ferreira had a 20-centimeter difference in terms of leg distance. I mean, that's huge. That's ridiculous. That's massive. Oh, that's another thing that's interesting about this. They use metric units, but it's based mostly in America. Very fascinating, because this is definitely a very international sport. Most of these fighters did not come from America. They came from way around the world. I mean, way around the world. So it was a really, really international affair, which is so fascinating. Now, when having Bas Rutten in this kind of adds a whole different dimension about what is going on here, because he has such a breakdown in his mind about what's the most optimal situation that a fighter should be in, right? And he just adds a whole different level to it, because he adds, the traditional karate names to things, and the way, so like an up kick or a teeth kick has a very specific name, he just adds so much to it. I just like having that guy there really just it takes everything up to just a whole different level. It's awesome. Whoa, I've never found that before. Huh. If that was S, it would be so much better. So, what else are we talking about here? Yeah, takedowns are encouraged, but clinching is not allowed. So, if you are a really, really skilled takedown artist, you can just bull rush your way in with that double leg, sweeping under, and just land on top of a guy and start landing punches for 5 seconds anywhere to the head. This is a 360-degree fight. That's so cool. That is fascinating. Now, there's so many advantages to this system, but so many disadvantages. Now, one of the coolest advantages to this system is the gloves. Now, the gloves are the way of the future. I predict all fighting organizations will move to this glove system. I don't see any other way that they won't. I just don't see it. Now, this glove system, excuse me, is a live feed. Now, what is that? What do I mean by that? I mean that they give you live statistics about what's going on with the fighter in terms of heart rate, in terms of punch speed. I mean, the most recent attack that the fighter committed to. This is ridiculous. This is the next level. There's no way that other organizations aren't going to pick this up once this happens. I mean, this is unheard of in terms of combat sports. And I mean, how old is combat sports at this point? It's so old. Is there any reason really that we're not doing this? I mean, I'm a big fan of that. Just in terms of what I've seen right there. Now, another point that I wanted to give a disadvantage to in terms of, you know, what I saw was, oh shit, I died. Oh, that's not good. You don't want to do that. Wow. So a disadvantage that I saw was that the ring, which is a square and has that 45-degree angle, the ring right there does not have an outside or an inside marker displaying how far away the edge of the ring is. Now, that is huge to me because I think a lot of fighters in the UFC use that inside octagon to determine how close that they are to the wall to kind of gauge about what the situation it is that they're in and how it is that they should approach it. This is huge, I think. I think that this is a massive, massive mistake that they made that they should fix, and hopefully that they're gonna fix, because that is such a massive opportunity that you've missed by not having that inside marker. Because during the course of these fights, I saw a lot of fighters on unsure footing because they were not completely certain about where the edge of that ring was. Now, I just feel that if the fighters knew where the edge of that ring was, they would have been a lot more willing to utilize that ring to its fullest potential. Because again, having Bas Rutten on that card, he was constantly stating that that ring could be utilized for push-off attacks, such as the Showtime kick, which he was referencing to over and over again during the fights, that he wanted to see someone utilize that ring to its fullest extent for a really, really sweet push-off kick or something like that. But I think the fighters simply could not feel where the edge of that ring was, and a lot of the fighters, once they got to that edge of the ring, they just lost their footing, and all of a sudden any sort of plan or of attack that they had at that point was out the window, because so now all that they're focusing on is, how do I get my foot under me while getting my brains bashed in by this other guy who can hit me from anywhere. He can hit me from anywhere. And boy howdy, were there some knockouts tonight. Whoa, whoa. I'm talking about really serious, huge knockouts. Impressive. So this is kind of like the breakdown of what I saw just in terms of the actual karate combat. That's how I saw a lot of the stuff there that definitely differentiates it from MMA. but also adds this whole different element that I think there's so many cool points that I want to see implemented into MMA. I want to see a lot. First of all, I want to see that the refs in MMA are way more willing to take a point for bullshit that the fucking fighters do. And they know they do it. They know that they do something that can cause serious damage to somebody else, like hitting somebody after a bell goes off or after the break or whatever. That is such bullshit, and I hate it. I hate seeing that in MMA so much. And I'm so happy that that ref took 1 point for doing that. It just blew my mind that, yes, this will not be tolerated in this league, and I'm so happy about that. That is a huge thing. Now, you have to have that inside ring marker. You have to. If your fighters are not sure about where they're stepping, they're not going to be as efficient and as effective. That's something that can be remedied pretty easily and pretty efficiently, and I think that there's no reason that they should not do that. Now, another thing that I did not like was that a lot of the fighters, again, this is still a new sport, so they still held their head way higher than they would probably any other sport, because it sure looked really dangerous for them to do that. And I don't think anybody got knocked out due specifically to that. Like holding your head up high, catching your chin on the way in, and getting your whole brain rocked around because you held your head too high. I don't think anybody got that done, but I can definitely see how that happened, because this karate style hasn't caught up, I think, to a really true, tried and tested combat scenario. Oh god damn it! Fucking snakes. I'm not even gonna do this.
Salutations.
I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And another thing that I think needs to be addressed is probably the venue, because it's really interesting. It's really kind of cool. The venue is fascinating because it's so modern and so intricate. And obviously, this is, I think, their fourth event of all time, so they're still kind of feeling out how they're doing it. But it's kind of strange seeing Danny Trejo's giant face going, "Fighters, fight!" and they're already fighting. That's sort of strange to me. And there's just little things, kind of odd. But I actually loved it, but I think they need to refine it. I think they need to refine how they're approaching that situation. Another thing that I didn't love was the way that people can clinch, like in boxing, and force the slowdown. And it's not so bad. That's one aspect of boxing that I never loved, because I never loved to see somebody have the ability to hold somebody. And I'm glad that they're kind of cutting down on that, because that's something that really slowed down a couple fights. And the referee actually threatened to take away points for some of the fighters who committed this. And again, huge fan of the way these referees are being implemented. It's massive. I love it. You know, take away points for, you know, they're encouraging fights. And these karate guys are so quick. It's absolutely insane how quick they are. Anyways, moving on to live fighter statistics. We covered that. Let's see now. Takedowns are allowed. The rings need to have inner markings. Huge fan of having Bas Rutten on. Adds a whole different dimension. What else can I say now? Let's go into the actual event of the night. Boy, howdy. Again, the link is in the description, because it is so exciting that I absolutely encourage anybody who's listening to this breakdown, go watch it for yourself. It is so awesome to see. Now, first event that I saw, anyways, I don't know if it was the first event of the night, but the first event that I saw was Kowalkiewicz versus Silva. Now, this was actually my personal fight of the night. Now, this was my personal knockout of the night. Kowalkiewicz versus Silva, with Silva being the winner, by a KO, a flat one-punch knockout after what I felt should have been stopped due to 2 other really hard knockdowns that, in my opinion, if this was MMA, probably would have been stopped a lot sooner. Not a huge fan of seeing someone take a whole bunch of unnecessary damage, and this guy had a flat knockout. I'm talking about his eyes rolled to the back of his head, and he faced the stars for a while after a really hard knockout, man. That was unbelievable. The next fight of the night was Ferreira versus Ait Ibrahim, and this was very strange because you don't ever see this in this stage of MMA. Perhaps in the early stages, but again, this is a brand new sport, so you're gonna have stuff like this. This was a TKO due to exhaustion. Now, Ferreira had been dealing with Ait Ibrahim's attacks, and she had her own really good attacks. In the second round, she had some good attacks that did damage to her opponent. Ferreira was in there, but in the third round, she got knocked down and refused to get back up due to exhaustion. I mean, she was physically unable to do so because she took some really hard hit. Again, this is a 360-degree fight. You can hit anywhere on the head, and I'm like encouraged to hit as hard as you can to the back of someone's skull. So this is a very different type of combat sport. But a TKO due to exhaustion, I've just never seen that before. It's very fascinating, very strange, and very awesome to see. The next fight was Budurbane versus Quireno, with Budurbane being the winner. Oh, I'm sorry. Ait Ibrahim was the winner in the previous fight. Budurbane being the winner of this fight versus Quireno in a tough knockout win. It was an even match all the way until Budurbane came up with a right straight from hell, and it was all over. It was all but over from there. I mean, from that point, once he landed that right straight, Quireno's eyes, he started to wander pretty efficiently right then, and Budurbane just went in for the kill. Like he got that win. He earned that win. It was a tough back and forth up until then, but once he got that solid right straight in there, boy, that was intense. Now the next fight, Viveros versus Mardi. This was the fight of the night. I'll recap all of this at the end. This was the fight of the night for me. Viveros versus Mardi. Boy, you're talking about 2 guys that are prime. They're in their prime. They're highly skilled, entertaining to watch, and truly the spirit of karate. I mean, these guys were so quick, even all the way up until the 3rd round, and so fast. I mean, just their technique was amazing to watch. I'm just a fan of this stuff. I'm a fan of fighting. I'm a fan of seeing these guys put it all on the line, and I'm so happy to see that there's another venue for people that didn't have this type of venue before. Think about if Michelle Watterson had this venue 10 years ago. Do you think that we'd have seen her in MMA trying to compete against, you know, grapplers and all this stuff? If Karate Hottie was still only doing karate, which was her first love. I mean, she's a fantastic martial artist. Obviously was a champion at atom weight and is a really competitive person at flyweight or whatever that 115-pound weight class. That division, it escapes my head right now, but she would have been dominant in karate. And I believe that to the core of my heart, and I'm so happy that this venue is made. Going back, though, to Viveros versus Mardi, boy, that was the fight of the night because these guys were so competitive. Now, in round 1, Viveros did that John Jones point the fingers right in the eye kind of technique. And what's so cool about karate is that you were able to swing in and out of that technique. So it's not so much of a barrier like it is in MMA. Now, it was 1-1, in my opinion, going into the 3rd. And Mardi secured the victory by finishing on top of a very even 3rd round. That was such an even 3rd round in my opinion. There was both big shots landed by both guys. Now, Bas Rutten actually thought it was Viveros that won. Now, in my opinion, Mardi did win because he ended that fight in a dominant position. Now, that to me secured it. who was going to win that last exchange, was going to win that fight. And Marty won that last exchange. So in my opinion, he did win that fight. But here's what made it the best fight of all of the night. It was a split decision, and both fighters were expecting this to go to an overtime. That's another thing. Okay, here's another way that it's different than MMA. There's overtimes if it's a draw, which I really hope in the next karate combat, whatever they're calling this event, 1, 2. I mean, they can't just keep on naming like the town that they hosted in. They have to have some type of number system going on here. But in whatever next event that they do, they have to have more draws, because some of these fights really did go to a split decision. And I think this was another one that, although I gave it the victory in terms of, if you had to pick one, I was still expecting for them to both go overtime. And both of the fighters, they looked like they were both expecting this to go to overtime. At the end of that fight, they were both staring at each other, ready to go, because they knew that this was a close contest. Really, really, really close, and they both knew, and I hope that they get to utilize that overtime for what it's intended for. Now, the next fight, Ibrahim versus Walker. This, if you have to pick a standout performance of the night, Ibrahim is the winner. He is my single performance of the night, standout performance of the night. Ibrahim, he had one of the hugest kick knockouts. He dropped Walker and pounced on top of him, and the referee, I think, pretty rightly stopped that fight. Walker did protest the decision of the referee to stop the fight. And I guess if this was MMA, then I would agree with that decision. But man, that was a huge kick. That was a massive kick. And this guy Ibrahim has massive knockout power. They were actually showing highlights from the previous events about where this guy competed in, I think Miami, and he had another massive knockout. Ibrahim is the guy to watch in this event, if in terms of just pure knockout. Silva versus Kowalski is the fight of the night. Is the knockout of the night. Viveros versus Marty is the fight of the night. Ibrahim is the standout performance of the night. The next fight is Di Castaneda versus Vukovic. Now, Vukovic did get the W. It was a close contest. Both fighters were very, very, very visibly exhausted at the end. And it was kind of hard to decide because it was... And they gave it to him. But it was a really close fight. Another one that... Man, I don't think they could have gone to overtime, but they probably should have because it was close. The next fight was the co-main event, Nduar versus Rob. And this fight was fantastic for Nduar. Both fighters were extremely skilled, obviously very knowledgeable. Rob is actually a PhD. This man went to college and got a degree. He has the word doctor before his name, and they read it as the word Dr. Rob. I forgot what his first name is, but he was a doctor, legit high-level dude who knows how to fight, obviously, and knows that he's very intelligent in terms of, as a cerebral fighter. But Nduar, he was just faster, he was slicker, and he had every single round secured, and everybody saw it like that. Every single judge had it 10-9, and I agree with that decision 100%. The next fight, it was the main event, Rocha versus Teubayev. Now, this was a really fascinating fight because Rocha, and along with one of the other fighters, I forgot who, actually trains with the Pitbull brothers from Bellator. A lot of these guys did have some Bellator experience, interestingly enough. Again, this was pretty interesting, close combination of MMA, boxing with a huge basis of karate, and it really, really shows, really does. Rob actually did commit to some Muay Thai, but not so much, not enough to win the fight, but he did try to commit to it. But this fight versus Rocha versus Teubayev, fascinating. Talk about two guys who are just explosive as all hell. Almost all of these fighters were, but these guys were just boom, boom, boom. Every single thing that they threw was just with such speed. It was amazing. And during the fight, according to Bas Rutten, Rocha did the first axe kick to a downed opponent of the night, and according to Bas Rutten, of all of karate combat. And that was actually one of my points of my disadvantages that I saw, because every fighter that I saw go to the ground for that 5 seconds of just give him everything that you got, they only threw punches, which really threw me off, because I was like, wait, why would you only do that? That doesn't make any sense. You're not utilizing this huge asset that you have of your legs. But then he threw it, and I said, oh, he's just changed the game. You're actually watching the game change as you're watching it live. It is the most unbelievable thing that I've ever seen. Now, Rocha, again, threw the first axe kick of the night, and he got the split decision. It was really, really close contest. I did give it to Rocha as a person who was spectating it. It was very close, but it just seemed like he was a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, and just a little bit more accurate. And that was one hell of a card that they put on right there. It was really exciting, and they just want to clear up some rules. They need to clear it up for the fans and make sure that all the fans understand the rules, because there's still some confusion about what's going on. Because as an MMA fan, I'm not a karate guy, I don't know any of the karate things, but I'm not a sport karate guy, I should say. I'm not sitting here watching points being thrown and seeing, okay, this is worth this much and whatever. I'm just a fan of combat. I'm a fan of two guys going in there, or women, or two humans going in there into this pit. They called it a pit. They didn't call it a ring. They called it a pit, which again is a pretty accurate representation of what's going on there, because it literally was a pit. That was pretty accurate, and I gotta say that's absolutely knockout of the night. Silva over Kowalkiewicz, single stand-up performance. Ibrahim with a knockout from hell. Overall, I would recommend this for any fight fan who's willing to see something different, something cool, something awesome, and I really hope that